a young guy, so he's got really, really high energy requirements anyway. Very active, and on top of that we're looking to get him to build muscle mass, which is a really energetically expensive procedure, especially for a young guy that is burning so many kilojoules doing a lot of activity. So first of all I had to have a look at what his skin folds were all about. So his skin folds is a physique assessment technique. So you've got different measurements from all over the body, and it's basically a pinch of fat, so whatever you can pinch off the muscle, and you get a reading in millimetres. So this just kind of sets out what all of those readings are. You've also got girths, so arm girth, arm plus a muscle, and then you've got waist, glute, legs, so on, so on, so on. Then you've got some bone breadths. Then when all of that is calculated in the spreadsheet, you've got an idea of somebody's somatotype, which is basically your relative thinness, fatness or muscularity. You can also tell your BMI and your waist to hip ratio, which you don't need the spreadsheet for, but it prints it out anyway. Your sum of 6 and your sum of 8 skin folds, depending on how many sites you're actually using, and your percent body fat. So it's a good idea to do skin folds when you're looking at changing your body composition, otherwise you're basically going off the scales, which is measuring mass rather than measuring changes in body composition, and when that's what you're aiming for, that's what you measure. So when we started off with this young athlete, we did his skin folds just to make sure we've got an idea of where he's starting and where he wants to get to. We can re-measure along the way. A set of skin folds from all over his body. You can see all of his girth measurements here and his bone breadth. This is 100% of your RDI. So his recommended dietary intake, and his protein intake was well and truly off the charts. Because of that, all of his B vitamins were well and truly up as well. Everything else he was consuming apart from thiamine was over the 100% of his RDIs. So what we needed to do was bring that back into a more reasonable range. Now the challenge with this young guy was, because he's young and because he's exercising so much, he needs to have a lot of food. The other challenge that we had as well was that because he was having so much in the way of supplements, and he'd been given the protein is good, carbs are bad message, his protein-carb ratio was completely upside down, which is pretty normal when I see athletes. Carbs are fuel and you need to have a lot of them, so for a growing body and for an exercising body your requirements are going to be really, really large. So what he was doing was having a lot of protein, which isn't going to provide your body the fuel it needs. So we needed to strip back some of the protein and start to put in some carbs. The thing that people often don't understand about protein is that people want to put on a muscle and they think that muscle is protein, so I'm going to eat a heap of protein. It doesn't really work like that. Your body can only use a really small amount of protein at any one time. So what you need to do is give your body that small amount that it can use really regularly so it can use it regularly. So once you've provided a regular, spaced out menu with protein, scattered evenly throughout the day, then you start filling up on carbs. We're not worried about his body fat. He's 6.2% body fat, so he's a lean guy. We need to increase his muscle mass, and we need to meet all of his nutritional requirements as well as his requirements for performance, which is expending a lot of fuel, and his requirements for growth, nutrition, and for building a muscle. So his energy requirements on any given rest day were about 15,000 kilojoules, which is still a lot. The average Australian will probably consume somewhere between 8 and 10,000 kilojoules a day for weight maintenance. And this guy on a rest day was needed to consume about 15,000. So on top of that 15,000 kilojoules we gave him on a rest day, we added exercise to that on a training day, and he was expending a lot of energy in training. He was training a lot of hours of the day. So we needed to give him enough fuel to cover that, provide him enough energy for that training session. And on top of that, he wanted to build a muscle. That muscle, being such an energetically expensive process, requires a huge energy surplus. So on those days of training, we required him to have over 20,000 kilojoules. So for this poor young guy who's working in training, his only other job for the day was to eat. So we gave him an energy intake of over 20,000 kilojoules in that day. We took his protein right down so he had enough energy. We took his supplements. His overall supplement intake was reduced. We did still keep some supplements in after his training session, and in some of his mid-meal snacks when he just couldn't physically eat anymore, we did start to add some of those back in. For breakfast was 2 cups of cereal with, he liked to have a lot of milk, 2 cups of milk, or 1.5 cups of cooked porridge, added milk and honey, and he was also going to have 2 bits of toast with peanut butter for breakfast. Before he was training, he wanted to take a supplement, and he was also going to have 500 ml of fruit juice. Then after training, he was going to have a couple of muesli bars with a piece of fruit and a tub of yogurt. Lunch was a couple of sandwiches or some rice or pasta with meat and veg. He was back into the juice, and he was going to have an extra rice or pasta portion for his exercise days. Afternoon tea was 2 more thick slices of bread with cheese, and dinner was steak, veggies and pasta or potato. And then his supper meal was yogurt or ice cream and a piece of fruit. It was a lot of food. I saw him a couple of weeks after we started the program, and he just said to me, "Emily, I just can't eat that much food." So we had to start to take out some of the food and replace it with fluids. Fluids are more quickly digested. They go through your gut in a sort of easier fashion, so it was easier for him to have more energy-rich fluids through the day rather than more and more and more food. So we just changed that around a little bit, so he was still getting the same amount of kilojoules at the end of the day, but just in a different fashion. So once we'd done that, I saw him again, and he said he was training better. He was definitely able to work out better in his gym sessions, and he was able to work out better in his academy sessions, so his performance was improved. I've only been seeing him for a couple of weeks, so there's still a few more weeks to go before we redo his skin folds to see if he's getting any improvements in his muscle mass, but we're keeping an eye on his weight. After the first couple of weeks, he actually lost weight because he could not eat enough. So that's not a good thing. After we rejig that around, he's actually gaining weight at the moment, which is good. We'll do his skin folds again and make sure he's actually gaining weight in the right way, and then we can just go from there.
My mind, see, I came here to shine, so let's get it on the grind. I'm a beast. Yeah, I'm in my own zone. It's beast mode time, so go hard or go home. I'm a beast. Yeah, I got it on my mind. See, I came here to shine, so let's get it on the grind. Step up in the building, swagger on point, right? Put your seatbelt on, cause it's gonna be a long night. It's gonna be a long